Yo, book nerds! Today we are going to talk about a controversial opinion when it comes to books. This polarizes book lovers and readers. So let's talk about it. I'm going to tell you where I stand on this issue. Should you or should you not reread books? I personally believe you should reread books. Now, the main argument, which I acknowledge, is very wise and sound. The main argument I hear against rereading books is that life is too short and I'm never going to read all the books I want to read anyway, so why should I waste time rereading books I've already read? Because if I reread this book, that means there's a book out there that I won't get to then. I agree. I know it makes sense. It does make sense. But I think there are some advantages to rereading books that outweigh that. When you reread a book, you can notice and appreciate things that you didn't notice, things that you missed on that first read. When you first read a book, you are so focused on the plot and what is going to happen and the unknown that you miss so much. And so when you reread it, you know what's going to happen. So you can slow down a little bit and appreciate the author's craft, all the little details that went into creating the work that you're reading. And it's wonderful, especially for books that have like a lot of foreshadowing. If you reread it and you see those things and you're like, oh my gosh, I missed that. How did I miss that? But of course you missed it the first time because you didn't know what was going to happen. But when you reread it, you have a little knowledge and you feel like you're like sneaky, like you know something you shouldn't know. It's fun. I, as someone who is a writer, I have a writing degree, and also someone that's going to become an English teacher, I love noticing those little details of the author's craft. It is just so much fun, and it shows just how much work that author put into that book. And it's amazing. And even on a reread, you still miss stuff. It's incredible. Another positive thing about rereading books is that if you're in a reader slump, which happens to the best of us, if you're in a reading slump, you can find an old favorite that you know you love and just dive back into that old world. That's what I do when I'm in a reader slump. I find a comfort book, something I know I love, something that's not going to be a challenge because I do know what's going to happen. And I just fall back into that world. And I usually love it still. On rare occasions, yes, you do reread a book and it's not the same as the first time, which is unfortunate. But usually, if you love a book enough to want to reread it, you're still going to love it. Rereading books at different points in your life also makes a huge difference, and I'm going to give you some examples. So, in college, when I was an undergrad, I took a Shakespeare class, and I think that the professor was brilliant, and I am actually friends with him, and I think he's great, and I had nothing against the professor of that class, but that class was so intense, and I was not prepared for the rigor of this Shakespeare class, that it made me not like Shakespeare. And I wrote off Shakespeare as like, he's not for me. I don't like him. Yeah, I didn't want anything to do with Shakespeare at all. If I never reread anything, that's what I would think of Shakespeare. But after graduating, it was like a year or two after I graduated with my bachelor's, I decided that I was going to give Shakespeare another chance. And I went out and I bought a few of his plays. And I started doing a reread. And it's taken me a long time. I kind of fallen off of my reread just because of life. But I have loved every play that I have reread. I just recently reread Macbeth, which was for college, for my grad school. But oh my gosh, did I love it this second time around. And I am planning a reread this year of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So if I would have never revisited Shakespeare, I would have missed out on something that I do think is very worthwhile. I would have had a bad impression of him in my mind, and I just wouldn't have gotten enjoyment out of him. And now I do get enjoyment out of him. And so many of his works have influenced other works, and it's incredible. If I had a bad feeling in my heart about Shakespeare, then I wouldn't obviously enjoy him, and then I'd be less likely to enjoy things that he's inspired. Now I appreciate it because I revisited it. Another example is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I first read this when I was a kid. I was probably 12 years old. Did I love it on the first read? Yeah, I loved this. But I just recently reread this a couple of years ago, and rereading it as an adult versus as a middle schooler, oh my gosh, the perspective shift. I got so much out of it that I didn't get when I was a kid. I obviously loved it. I had great memories and happy vibes and good feelings about this book. And that all stayed. But I added to it by rereading it. I got to see different perspectives. I really related to Mrs. March. I understood love better because I wasn't a kid. And not just romantic love, but familial love. And so it was a wonderful reading experience to revisit this, because when you're a kid, you just don't have the same experiences from life. And so when you revisit it, you get a whole different perspective. It was like rereading a new book, even though I knew what was going to happen. So in conclusion, I definitely think rereading books has huge value. Those were just a couple examples. I have reread many books and found so much joy and so much detail I missed, and just been able to appreciate and get something new out of it each time. And I think it's all in moderation. Should you reread books constantly? No, I don't think so. I think if you're constantly doing rereads, you're obviously never going to get something new. Yeah, I agree. So you need to find a balance. Finding a balance is a good thing. I really encourage you to try rereading books. If you're a person that says, I will never reread a book, I urge you to give it a shot. Pick something you love, or pick something you read as a kid and revisit it, and you'll see so much that you didn't see the first time. So yes, that is why I believe you should reread books. It's true, we are never going to read everything that we want to read. So we have to accept that. We just have to accept it. And so why not get some enjoyment out of something you know you enjoy by revisiting a favorite? It's just like going on trips. Like, I love to travel to new places. I know I'm never going to see the entire world, but I also love revisiting my favorite places in the world. I love going camping at the same campground that I camped at when I was a kid. And yeah, I could go somewhere else I've never gone before, and I love doing that. But I also love going back to those same places and seeing them again. It's the same with reading. So that is my stance, and I would love to know what you think in the comments. Tell me if you reread books, if you don't reread books, and why. And let's chat. That's all for me this week, and I will see you guys next Monday. Hit like and subscribe, and thanks for talking books with me.